that was total Christmas. That was total Christmas package. Are you ready to get this Christmas spirit sprinkled all over your face?
Yes. Yes.
Open your mouth and get ready for Christmas spirit.
Ah! Oh my fucking Jesus!
Parasitism. A symbiotic relationship in nature where one party benefits and the other is harmed, and is utilized in various scenarios by creatures of all walks of life, and even some non-living. One of the most relevant and iconic parasitic creatures in sci-fi is that of the Xenomorphs from the Aliens franchise. Creatures that reproduce often by having their facehuggers sticking they shit inside the mouths and infesting other creatures, with their offspring causing them to violently burst from their host's chest. Additionally, they are fast, intelligent, and survivalistic even from birth, able to survive in the vacuum of space, and resilient enough to go head-to-head with predators among other races. And they have even had similar break-off species from other franchises, such as Gene Stealers from the Warhammer universe, who have similar abilities. When we apply a creature like this to Rimworld's newest DLC, Odyssey, we would have a pawn capable of surviving in the vacuum of space, but stranded until someone foolish enough decides to land there. Thus, we have to put together a new xenotype capable of being a lone-infesting creature, capable of surviving in the vacuum of space. The question is, who do we know who is a parasitic arthropod supremacist who would have a high enough level of bloodlust for this?
Yeah, who was that? Was that Bo Bridges? Do we know Bo Bridges?
No, we don't. But I'm positive we know somebody who was in the Peace Corps.
That's right, I'm the main character for this playthrough, designing my race into only two categories, the Intimidant Ekon and the Locust. The Ekon, vicious fighter and evil scientist, designed to not only be able to casually exist in the vacuum of space, but also extremely dangerous and contains the parasitic endogene injector, which will allow me to implant a chest burster inside of people, which will then hatch as the Locust. A lower variant that is also capable of surviving in the vacuum of space, but unlike me, is able to photosynthesize and devour people's brains and steal their skill set like a lector. Oh, and I also have a pocket dimension, so that kind of balances it out. The long-term goals of this series are to escape the asteroid, destroy both the Combine and the Shattered Empire, as well as any other prominent factions, deactivate the mechanoids for good, and reclaim power over the Void. The only rules are I can't alliance with anyone, and only Intimidant-adjacent races, or people I mutate into other disgusting or gorgeous chimeric slaves, are allowed in my colony. But with that being said, I got started completely alone on the remnants of a destroyed grav ship on an asteroid, and just like that, the challenge had begun. And getting started, I immediately did what any insect would do, and that's start burrowing into the walls and making a bunker. Now, even though I myself don't need to worry about the cold or even breathing, I'll still need a room to prevent my starting items from breaking, and I will also need an oxygenated room at a temperature above 0 in order to grow my food. And since there's no telling if and when a trader or a raid will ever show up for me to eat them, my first objective here has to be preparing hydroponics, which will need several prerequisites, including microelectronics and the multi-analyzer, so I can research the oxygen pump. And the actual power, which our only option for now is solar panels. I wasn't finding anything inside this starting asteroid, but it wasn't entirely fruitless though, as I was still getting the ship wreckage and cargo drops, the first drop pod even containing a bunch of the Emperor's tears. Researching, although, was actually the easiest part of this, as my intellectual curiosity gene allows me to gain recreation for it, as well as making it so that I'll never lose skills in this category. This allows me to focus on almost nothing but research, and it was working well as I had already completed hydroponics, solar panels, and batteries, and got to building my hydroponics with me optimistically starting with the sus windmill design for it. However, I was already starting to realize a problem. I wasn't just not finding metal deposits on this asteroid was looking like it was completely barren of any materials at all, effectively making this ship wreckage the only way I could get metal or other materials, and making this entire map a massive glorified paperweight. The supply drops could keep me going for a little bit longer, with me even getting some insect ketamine, but at this point I was over halfway through my survival meals, and even consuming the Emperor's tears was not helping the situation much. I kept coping for a few more days before coming to terms that there was no way I was finishing the hydroponics windmill, though I was not ready to give up just yet, as I realized I could teleport batteries into my pocket dimension and they would still have their charge. Thus, I came up with the 500 IQ strategy of planting mushrooms in the pocket plane, and swapping the batteries out on the solar panel over and over again until I made it out with some harvest. And this plan actually had the slightest semblance that it might work at first. However, this was blown to pieces when I botched half the harvest, realizing that there was no way that I was surviving this next cycle of whatever the hell you call this, and instead just opted to give up right here and ended this attempt JoJo style. However, I wasn't willing to give up on this challenge just yet, but we definitely needed a new approach. First off, we need to move to an asteroid with deposits on it. Asteroids in standard Rimworld will have one of several materials inside of them, including jade, uranium, silver, gold components, steel, and plasteel. I'm going for a meteor with standard steel in it, as I'll be able to both use it to build items and small constructions, as well as convert to components later on when I need. Additionally, asteroids also have the chance to have an Archean tree spawn on them, which not only thrive in the vacuum of space and turn all its surrounding blocks into fertile soil, but also produce a fair amount of oxygen, being enough to grow crops around. Thus, our optimal condition will be an asteroid with both steel deposits and an Archean tree. Though, after like 30 minutes of searching, I couldn't find one with both of them in it, so I just gave myself an Archean seed, as well as some previous survival gear from the other start, and we were officially on to round 2. Once again, resorting to ethno-nationalist insect behavior, I began burrowing again. Though this time my first objective was to get the Archean tree planted in a closed-off area so we can begin oxygenating out all the vacuum. And it was already fertilizing the soil and fully oxygenated the room the moment I cleared it off, meaning as soon as I got a heater down we were ready to start growing food. So I got to work mining some of the metal out and hollowing out a room for research, and after only a few days I researched both the battery and solar panel, got it all set up, and as soon as the heater flipped on I was able to start planting mushrooms, stopping the starvation timer. The tree's radius is also much bigger than this, but I'm keeping it small for now just to make sure that there's enough oxygen and heat for all the mushrooms starting out. And after my first harvest, I now had more than enough food and time to finish microelectronics without having to suffer the same fate communism did.
No! I'm not gonna let you eat!
From there we were able to move more towards progression, such as making the nest a bit bigger to store all my stuff, and getting an advanced research bench built, since we had plenty of excess power. Since the backstones can be built with, I also started turning them into blocks in my spare time, and a little while later my first victim arrived from some random-ass pirate faction, and in typical raider fashion, they immediately resort to vandalism trying to destroy my solar panel, which caused me to accidentally punch her to death on purpose. Though I have her SMG now, so it was still a net positive. And it was right back to homesteading, where I got my room as well as a comms console set up, probably one of the most important pieces, so I would actually have the ability to trade if and when an orbital trader ever shows up. Oh wow, that was fast. Anyways, an exotic trader really only had one thing I needed, and could also afford with my remaining survival meals and some components, and that was an advanced component, which is what I would need the fabricator for, but that's still a ways away. Though, only a few days later, I got another trader who I was able to buy half the gold I needed for the analyzer, with a bunch of my excess space mushrooms. One of the plus sides about living in space is, since everything is always freezing, pretty much nothing rots. We were able to begin on multi-analyzers not much later, and just got to generally bulking up the base in appearance. Though our second raid came in the form of another single pirate from the same faction that tried to raid me last time, though who I accidentally finished inside of too hard. This pirate had the idea of, for some reason, bringing a bio-coded incendiary launcher into the vacuum of space, leading me to believe that this was not actually a legitimate attack, and instead a glorified DoorDash order from some research team that wants to see what happens when they feed me people. Fortunately, this person survived. Fortunate for us, not for them, and I stashed her inside the Archean tree room so she would be oxygenated and self-feeding from the fungus garden. Now, parasitic infection for some humans may be considered amoral and an atrocity. However, I would actually like to take the chance to morally defend myself in this situation by pointing out that this colonist is incapable of both skilled labor and intellectual, thus this is basically one of the most moral things I could do. And after our extremely morally virtuous action, I finished researching the multi-analyzer and got started on a growth vat because raising an infant on an asteroid. A slave ship passed by, but I already decided I was going to be mutating my own farm tools for this playthrough, so I just traded them most of my medicine for some components. We finished researching the growth bat and got it built shortly after. I ended up researching orbital tech too, even though the Archean tree is more than enough oxygen for now.
What a nice tree. I love trees.
I'll probably just use it to grow more mushrooms with the oxygen pump, since, once again, my kind doesn't need to breathe in space. Additionally, we were moving down the research tree of transport pods, so that if all else fails, I can just pod out of here. I was able to produce more and more mushrooms as I slowly increased the Tree of Life's cell room, 90% of which would go to the growth vat, though. My prisoner then attempted to refuse being used as a living oven, so I had to walk back in and RKO them again. I got another bulk trader who wanted to sell me a bunch of medium-sized dogs, even though if I bought a single one, they would immediately explode due to being in the vacuum of space, so instead I just sold them the rest of my medicine and started chipping away at my 50 plasteel requirement. chopping up the corpse of my first victim, because we can't let that go to waste, more general chores like mining up the steel, our microwave tried to escape again, and then yet another raid from the pirates, who this time sent upon wielding an EMP launcher, who didn't even bother targeting me, but I didn't really care either, more microwaves for me. Unfortunately, I didn't really have the food production to handle another microwave, much less a second growth vat, so I kinda just pulled their spacesuit off and let the vacuum do the rest of the work. Shortly after, our microwave concluded and gave us our first chestburster baby, but more importantly, a random cargo drop gave us a bunch of non-stylish face masks. Anyways, I immediately put my infant spawn into the growth vat, which I immediately began feeding them the chopped up remains of the person he just chest busted. I'm sure he wouldn't mind though. Though the real question was now, would I have enough food to get my first spawn to childhood? Well, for some reason, I didn't decide that was important either, as it was time for me to do a sad wonder.
We now go live to the 405 where an unusual scene is unfolding.
I invested in making art sculptures so I would have something else to sell to traders, even though we all know art school usually doesn't end well. My spawn successfully made it to childhood and chose a powdered wig as his hairstyle, before a raid came, which was once again just glorified DoorDash, who immediately captured and dragged back to our nest to become the next microwave. A suspiciously topical meteor landed on the steel asteroid, and just like that, a few minutes later, I was already incubating my second spawn, and additionally ironing out a second room for him, and getting ready to stretch out my Archean tree to a greater length so I can continue to biologically care for my spawns with disgusting mushrooms while my second microwave protested his usage as a microwave. And the pirate raids were getting more consistent now, though fortunately I'm basically a monster compared to a single unaltered pawn, so I just pulled some Aliens movie-type cave ambush on them.
High IQ gamer, let's go.
I mistakenly tried to push the Archean tree too fast, and it very predictably blew up in my face, with some of the ceiling coming down, causing all the fungus in the garden to die instantly, which in the short term almost caused us to starve. Repairing the ceiling, I started replanting while a bunch of orbital debris crashed down outside of my cave nest, and getting prepared for the second biopod, an orbital trader came in clutch, whom we bought a bunch of venison from, along with buying some gravlight panels for an airlock, and finishing up my gold requirement for the multi-scandalizer. And after a bit more housework and plowing the fields, my second spawn emerged from the microwave, though I didn't immediately have the food to feed him, so I did the mature and responsible thing and threw him outside next to the solar panels in the vacuum of space, so he could photosynthesize while I prepared to shove him inside of a test tube. Fortunately, the harvest came in not long after, and since the Archean tree was now being fully utilized, it was more than enough food. And not even a day later, another DoorDash or another raid arrived, which once again saw them being knocked unconscious, and dragged into my cave to experience the unspeakable horrors I would subject them to.
You gonna rape and kill me?
What is it with you and rape? No one's raping anyone.
And not even a day later, I got another pirate raid, though this one was special because they sent a grand total of one extra person, though the first person also brought an AMP launcher, so they were basically a freebie. But the second person was actually a brawler or something because they were able to stand in a fist fight with me for a very significant amount of time, like the final cinematic battle of the pirates, as we continued to trade blows with each other. I don't know if they were like hopped up on Gojizz before, but whatever the case is, I eventually won. Since we already had a prisoner, I went ahead and just ripped the other pirate's spacesuit off, and finished them off by constructing an airlock so we wouldn't have oxygen leaking out anymore. I had to make walls around it too, so it didn't immediately vacuify the entire living quarters, but getting it constructed, the inside of this asteroid was now officially somewhat livable, maybe, and just like that, we made it to 100 days on the asteroid as an extremely dangerous parasitic organism. So far, we haven't completed any of our objectives yet, with me even opting to destroy the starting transport pods on the asteroid, with the future of this challenge unknown of whether or not we will be able to stop either one of the empires or the mechanoids. But if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, please leave me a comment down below telling me your thoughts as well as what you would like to see next, both Rimworld and otherwise. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing as I upload new long-form content every week, as well as new shorts most every day encapsulating variety content, including challenges, guides, memes, audience participation, playthroughs, and even theories. Also, join the Discord with the link in the description, as well as the pinned comment to become part of the show. But with all that being said, thank you all again so much for watching, and thank you to my channel members and Patreon supporters, and I will see you all next time.